I am in Los Angeles, and you're in San Francisco, yes?
That's right.
It,
And later this afternoon, you have an in-person interview with someone from Hamilton?
not the cast of Hamilton, but Laird Hamilton. You're a surfer, yes?
Ah, oh, so someone, sorry for the confusion. Yeah, so Lisa Hamilton. And yes, I'm a surfer.
So the gentleman I'm interviewing a little bit later today is Laird Hamilton, who many consider to be the best big wave surfer of all time.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's incredible. You've seen his videos, right?
Yeah, I just have been doing. While I was researching you, so today's a wonderful day for me because today I get the pleasure of interviewing three legends: yourself, then Gabby Reese, who's Laird Hamilton's wife, who's an amazing mother, pro volleyball player, etc., and Laird Hamilton, who, yeah, as you said, yes, I have watched his videos. Has surfed some of the most powerful waves on the planet.
That is incredible. I love surfing because partly it's a metaphor for life. The ocean is very unpredictable. It's a powerful force. And I love the challenge of trying to balance on this board on the powerful ocean. You can feel the board vibrating as you're riding the wave. So you immediately feel the ocean and it's really connected. And I love experiencing that.
Yeah, you said it beautifully. I agree. I think surfing is one of the most powerful metaphors for life. I'll be honest, I'm not very good, but I'd like to go out and experience the power of the ocean. It's been one of my great teachers. I actually live on the ocean.
What are other ways you experience the power of the ocean?
Swimming. I love to swim. I've been swimming my whole life. My dad, when I was a little boy, would take me in the pool. So when I was an infant, just born, he socialized me to the water, and he would take me. He would say, I'm like a whale," and he would put me. And I remember grabbing onto his shoulders. He's a big guy like me. I'm about 6'4", and he would swim through the water underwater, and it's one of my earliest and fondest memories. And so for me, the ocean is one of the places that I feel most connected to nature, and for me, nature is like church. And so the ocean is a place in which I get very clear, and oftentimes I feel reborn. Like when I go in the ocean and I come out, I feel like a new person.
Wow, I like the imagery of you hanging onto the shoulder of a whale and trying to go as deep as you can in the pool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's powerful. I'll send you a link. I just watched a film, which I'll link to the notes after this below, but of a really powerful story that I think you'll love. I watched 2 days ago. It's about a man who lives in Patagonia at a lighthouse, and a woman who brings her son, who is high spectrum autistic, and the degree to which he can communicate with the orcas, the whales, is next level because his sensitivity to sound is so acute, and the therapeutic benefit is profound. And I know, as an advocate for disability rights, I think that it would be, and someone who's passionate about the ocean, I think it's something you would really love.
I love to read that story. It reminds me of Temple Grandin and how she I wouldn't say communicates with animals, but she's an animal science professor, an expert, and she is able to use her visual awareness to see things from the animal's perspective. And by seeing things from the animals' perspectives, she can identify potential stressors and advise people to rearrange buildings, structures within a farm to make it more comfortable for the animals.
Wow, that's incredible. What's her name?
Temple Grandin.
Okay, I'll have to link to her below as well in the show notes. I really want to check out her work. I've been working at a place, I've been supporting a place called the Wolf Connection, which I know you have an amazing guide dog named Maxine. I'd love next time you're in LA to invite you. It's called the Wolf Connection, and they've rescued 25 wolves, and they bring youth from throughout Los Angeles, especially youth who've had particular challenges, and they bring them together with the wolves, and there's a huge therapeutic protocol, and it's one of the most special places I've ever been. I think you would love it.
How close do they get to the wolves? Do they touch the wolves, or are they behind fences?
Yes, you can touch the wolves. So Teo, the founder, has created a whole protocol. So he's from Argentina, and he's almost like a wolf whisperer. And so he's socialized the pack so that you can interact with the wolves. And the wolves, he talks about the history of wolves, because wolves have grown with humans over time in such a way that we have a very powerful relationship. And so he talks about the fact that the wolves can bring us back to ourselves. So he has, now he doesn't force interaction, but what's amazing is that the wolves, kind of like what you were saying earlier, they can sense where a human is in terms of their energy and their emotions. And so they'll interact differently with different humans, and especially with youth. So they kind of interact in very special ways. Sometimes they'll connect with you, sometimes they won't, but it's all based on the energy you're bringing. So you can't fake it. It's based on who you are and how you're showing up.
That's incredible. Maxine. Some people think Maxine looks like a wolf.
She does look like a wolf. I remember when I met you at Wanderlust. She looks like a wolf. She's a German Shepherd, yes?
Yeah, that's right. She's a German Shepherd.
Yeah, it's amazing. How has Maxine? How does your connection with Maxine help you navigate the world?
Maxine was trained at the Seeing Eye. It's a guide dog school in New Jersey, and there are about 13 different guide dog schools around the country. They all train the dogs slightly differently. So I did research beforehand, and I studied the differences between the guide dog schools. And I picked the best matched what I was looking for. The most training and lots of German Shepherds. I really wanted a German Shepherd. So I'm gonna pause one moment and come right back. I need to load down. I researched all the different guide dog schools in the United States, and I picked the one that I liked best. And I was looking for training how much training does the dog receive? I was also looking at the different breeds that are trained. A lot of schools don't do German Shepherds, and I really wanted a German Shepherd because they look smart with their pointy ears. Labs with floppy ears don't look as smart.
I understand.
See? Labs are the most popular Labs are the most popular guide dogs because they're very easy to train. When dogs are smarter, they have more attitude, they insist on making more decisions. So it's a little harder to train German Shepherds, but it definitely can be done. So fewer schools do German Shepherds. The Seeing Eye in New Jersey does German Shepherds. So I flew all the way to the Seeing Eye to get a German Shepherd guide dog. And she's trained to move around obstacles. So if we're walking down a sidewalk and there's a garbage can in the middle of the sidewalk, she will move around the sidewalk so that I don't crash into the sidewalk. She will stop at the end of the sidewalk when we get to the corner. If there's a car coming, she will stop. If I tell her go forward and there's a car coming, she won't go forward. It's
Wow.
called intelligent disobedience.
Wow.
They're not machines. They're trained to think for themselves. And if their owner says go forward and there's some kind of barrier, the dog will disobey. So you want personality, you want the dog to make decisions for themselves, but you also want the dog to respect and want to please the owner. So it's a really fascinating relationship of respect, making decisions for themselves. It's really fun. I love having a guide dog.
That sounds like one of the more powerful relationships one can have, period, whether with human or with animal. What's it like to trust? How, what how I imagine you trust Maxine completely. What's it like to be in that type of a relationship with an animal where you trust them so completely?
It's complicated.
As all great relationships are, yes.
Exactly. So I don't trust her completely because
Mm.
she's a dog. She's highly trained, but she's still a dog.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes when we're walking down the sidewalk, her body will tense up and it'll turn in a certain direction. And to me, that usually means there's some kind of animal distraction. A squirrel, another dog. And even though her body is saying, let's go left, I know we're going to ignore that. I'm not going to trust that signal. So I've learned to listen to her and ignore her or override some of her claims. Similarly, she does the same thing to me. She listens to me, but sometimes she uses intelligent disobedience.
Fascinating. So you're in a dynamic communication and exchange with Maxine.
Yeah, she offers an idea. I listen. Sometimes I agree and follow through. Sometimes I disagree. She's very smart. And sometimes she makes good decisions that I like. Other times she wants to make decisions that I disagree with. And I have to say, no, we're not going to chase the squirrel.
Yes. Well, I can imagine that it's a nuanced relationship and a powerful one. You mentioned something earlier I'd like to touch on because I've been watching all of your interviews, and there's something you are obviously a huge advocate for disability rights, but one of the things that you talked about is the notion of obstacles, and whether you have a quote unquote disability or not, we all face obstacles. How do you see obstacles?
Got it. I have a disability and I'm comfortable with the word disability. Some people use other words like differently abled, special needs. I don't like using those words. I like being real, describing things the way they are. Also, the word disability is tied to civil rights. It's called Americans with Disabilities Act, not Americans with Different Abilities Act or Americans with Special Needs Act. So disability has a lot of positive connotations to me. There are some negative associations as well, and instead of carrying the shame of those negative associations, I try to use my own story to remove and override those negative associations. So I'm actively changing what it means to be disabled. And as a deaf-blind woman, living in a world designed for people who can see and hear, I face tons of obstacles. And I choose whether to treat those obstacles as permanent and unmovable, or as opportunities to create new solutions.
So you choose to see, if I'm understanding, choose to see obstacles as opportunities for new solutions.
Most of the time, yeah.
Keeping it real. Keeping it real. I like that. Yes, most of the time. Beautiful. Let's touch. I'd like to. You mentioned your story. I'd love it if you share a little bit. If we could go back into your personal history, which I've researched. Your heritage is Eritrean and Ethiopian. Is that correct?
My family, my parents, mother and father are from Eritrea and Ethiopia. My mother grew up in Eritrea. My dad grew up in Ethiopia.
And you have a brother?
I have 3 siblings. I have a younger sister and 2 older brothers. And one of my brothers is also deafblind.
Is he older than you?
That's right. Yeah, one of my brothers is older than me.
He was raised in Eritrea or Ethiopia before coming to the U.S. Is that right?
That's right. My older brother was raised in Eritrea.
How do you see, in your experience, the views of disability differing? And this is a big question, but differing in terms of other countries versus the U.S. And furthermore, as you advocate for rights around the world, what are some of the key points of view or key ways in which you approach the challenges so as to make the lives of those living with disabilities better?
All around the world, in the United States, in Eritrea and Ethiopia, there are people who are afraid of differences. And disability is a form of difference. And some people choose to just completely avoid the difference. They stay away from people with disabilities, or if they are around someone with a disability, they will ignore them, ignore the disability, treat it as taboo. I try to teach people that difference is an asset. We should celebrate the way we're different. We also have a lot of similarities. Rather than hiding our differences, we should embrace them and see them as unique things we contribute to our communities. Especially in the workforce, differences drive innovation. It's a unique perspective you bring to the table. The more unique perspectives there are at a table, the more ways you're going to develop to tackle a problem and create a solution. So it benefits communities to have this diversity. And I treat disability as an asset, as something unique to bring to the table that's going to help shape the future.
I love that. How have you seen in your work with different companies or different? I mean, yeah, I've seen you obviously honored by Prime Minister Trudeau in Canada and President Obama and President Clinton, and I know you've worked with a large number of different companies. How have you seen innovation spurred by those living with disability?
I have a great talk that I did for the Apple Worldwide Developers Conference that highlights some of the stories throughout our history where people have driven innovation. For example, one of the fathers of the internet, Vince Cerf, is deaf, hard of hearing, hearing impaired, and he worked on one of the earliest email protocols. Communicating through the telephone is difficult or impossible when you can't hear well over the telephone. So creating a new way for people to connect by sending messages instantly back and forth, electronic mail, that benefits people who are deaf and hard of hearing. It also benefits hearing people. Lots of hearing people use email. So this is an example where someone had a challenge and ends up building a solution that helps address that challenge. And that solution benefits the entire world. So when we build solutions based on disability, we end up developing the next big thing.
I love it. I love also that you focus on the narrative of seeing the opportunity and the innovation. I talk about, so I know that people talk about compliance, right? That they have to do something to accommodate for those with disabilities. The way that you're reframing the narrative is one oriented towards the profound strength that comes from diversity, and also the opportunity that comes from the innovative thinking born of necessity. This is somewhat similar when I worked to build Global Citizen. You know, we tried to change the narrative around those living with extreme poverty, right? At the time, there were 1.3 billion people around the world living in extreme poverty. And we said, let's not turn this into a thing around guilt and shame. There's a huge opportunity if we help to raise our brothers and sisters around the world living under $1.25 a day, and think of all of the innovations, all of the ways in which all of our lives will be benefited if those people have the opportunity to create in the ways that we create. And I love that you're totally reframing the narrative around those living with disabilities. How many people currently live with disabilities around the world?
Around the world, there are about 1.3 billion people with disabilities.
Wow, so very similar.
Yeah, it's huge. And technology and money does help in finding some solutions. A lot of accessible technology is expensive, but money is not always the answer. You can develop many low-tech solutions. For example, I use a digital braille display and keyboard for communication. But if I couldn't afford that, then I could use sign language with a lot of people, or I could use print on palm, where people draw letters on the palm and can feel what's being written. So there's a lot of low-tech solutions.
Amazing. Where are you seeing some of the most exponential benefits, either in low-tech accessible solutions or high-tech innovations that you feel will have profound impact on those living with disabilities?
Those people with disabilities who don't have the resources to buy high-tech solutions, or within government systems that won't provide the funding for those high-tech solutions, then they can turn to low-tech solutions. And the internet is a great way to share information about what these low-tech solutions are. For example, people can go into communities and teach sign language, or they can go into communities and teach people how to use a white cane to travel around a community. A lot of the world doesn't have access to guide dog training, so using a white cane is a cost-effective, simple, and very great way to navigate an environment non-visually. I use a white cane too. There are certain situations where it's easier for me to use a white cane than to use a guide dog. In order to get a guide dog in the United States, you have to first be confident and comfortable traveling with a white cane. So a white cane is a great tool that's low tech and affordable and can work anywhere in the world.
So it sounds like there's an array of tools that you use that help you navigate most effectively, and that those tools are also, there's sort of differing levels of access, but wherein there's no access, there are still low tech tools that can be encouraged to support those living with disabilities, such as things like white canes, sign language training, etc.
Exactly. So I need to do as much as I can to provide access for myself. So I learn tools. Different situations work for different tools. For example, when I'm sitting down, I can use my braille display and computer. But when I'm walking around, it's harder to read from my computer while I'm walking around. And those can be situations to use sign language, to use print on palm. So there are lots of different situations where a certain solution won't work, and you have to be flexible and try to use a different solution.
So powerful. Now, you're known for many things, but one is being the first deafblind graduate of Harvard Law School. And I know that well, let me ask you this question first. How was it navigating? I mean, I've done graduate school as well, which was challenging in and of itself. How was navigating the Harvard Law degree? Was it more challenging as a result of being deafblind, or did it wind up being an asset in certain regards?
I went to a law school that knew the Americans with Disabilities Act. So because they understood the law, they knew they had a responsibility to ensure the law school was accessible to me. So I had my books in Braille. I had my exams in Braille. I had interpreters in class. I had access to the dance classes. I was part of the ballroom dance team my first semester in law school. I wanted to ensure that I had fun in addition to working hard, and I maintained a balance of studying and working hard and connecting with people and dancing. It's really, really important, even in law school, to make sure you feel alive, you're connecting with the world, connecting with people. And that was an important part of my law school experience. What did you do for grad school?
I went to Columbia University, not too far from you, and I studied Tamil, the language. I actually lived in Sri Lanka for 2 years when I was in college, and then I went back on a Fulbright scholarship. So I went and I speak Sinhala, and at the time, Sri Lanka was in the middle of a civil war, and I wound up one of the more intense and informative experiences of my life was being I was in behind quote unquote enemy lines when the ceasefire ended, and so I encountered both Sinhalese and Tamil refugees and saw the consequences of war, and so it inspired me to learn a new language, and which is interesting that we're talking because I actually was diagnosed when I was younger with a learning disability. So languages are very hard for me, not in the context of living in a place. So when I lived in Sri Lanka, learning Sinhala was actually not hard for me because I'm very visual and I learn well. I lived with a family, so in interacting with my nangis, my little sisters, I learned the language quite quickly. But at grad school, to study a language through book learning, was one of the hardest things I've ever done. It was it was very, very hard because Tamil's also a tonal language. So I had to learn to read, write, and speak a language at 30 that I had been exposed to for only an hour or two, very, very little amount of time. So it was a very profound challenge, and one that I still relish to this day because it forced me to train different aspects of my brain. And then I wound up going back to Sri Lanka and volunteering with an amazing NGO that works actually with people living in disabilities and also with villages around the country. They do something called the Sarvodaya Shramadana movement, which is basically encouraging people through self-reliance. So instead of waiting for the government to help them with various programs, they work with villages to raise themselves up. So they have a saying, we build the road and the road builds us. And so they'll do activities like build a well or build a road, and every person in the village, no matter how old, how sick, participates, whether that means they cook or they carry a rock or it's basically about seeing the value in each person and having each person feel a sense of contributing such that they feel a valuable member of the community. Because traditionally in Sri Lanka, the notion of privacy and the notion of possession don't exist in the same way that it exists for us linguistically. So you exist in relationship to the community. What I studied on my Fulbright was community building. So if you fall out of balance, it's the role of the whole community to bring you back into balance, into wholeness with the community. So it's a little bit of a longer answer, but I went to graduate school to study Tamil because I was interested deeply in the notion of community and creating community, especially where community has been broken, like in the context of war, or even in the context, I think, of our current society where people feel alone and disconnected from others.
That's incredible that their language is relationship based, and if one person feels disconnected and broken, the whole community is disconnected and broken. It's interesting to how language reflects and influences our communities, and that knowledge can help you teach and rebuild the community in Los Angeles in the United States.
Yeah, I've been looking to apply the principles. I mean, it was such a transformative experience in my life that I've since then been working to apply those principles, right? How do you take the beauty, and not to overly romanticize, but how do you take the incredible virtues and values that are imbued in a culture that values community to such a deep level, and how do you apply that in the context of a more Western culture and society, which is so oriented towards the individual and individual gain, and that's what's celebrated. And not to make one better than the other, but I'm fascinated in how we as individuals can also work to build a new sense of community, such that there's an inclusiveness, but also we can encourage individual innovation. So that's the great question I feel like I'm living into in life.
Maybe start by sharing stories from Sri Lanka, their cultural legends and stories that teach inclusion.
Yes, you hit it on the head. Actually, that's what I studied. So I don't talk about this enough, but I studied two rituals. One which is called Saniyakuma, the other which is called Kolam Maduva, and they are traditional rituals which unfortunately were nearly extinct because they didn't have the traditional artists and healers to continue the traditions. So my teacher, who was a 7th generation healer, he was taught by his father, and his father was taught by his father before him. He didn't have a son, so he offered to teach me in the traditional way, which was a huge honor. And so I lived and studied with him for 2 years, and I've been working to apply what I learned in my own way since then, both by sharing the story and by working on things like Global Citizen Festival with another amazing group of people to bring about some of the values. Like one of the things in Sri Lanka is, music is such an incredible, and you're a dancer, so you'll appreciate this. My teacher danced around the world. So he was forbidden to dance by his mother because his mother it was during colonial times, his mother wanted him to be a doctor or a lawyer because that was the prevailing value during the British rule. And he was so defiant that he learned how to dance by watching his father teach other students and mimicking their shadow. And he became one of the best dancers in the country, and he traveled all around the world. But dance was just one aspect of his artistry. He was also a master drummer and a master woodcarver and an astrologer and all of the different things that were necessary to bring people back into balance with their community. So I've been looking to apply those here by things like creating with a group of others the Global Citizen Festival and now other events where hopefully we can bring people back into a sense of being part of something bigger than themselves.
Dance is a beautiful way to connect with the world and share stories with the world. And when you, Michael, help spotlight these stories and amplify these voices from Sri Lanka, you help teach the world all the different perspectives we have, all the different ways we can live in the world.
Yes. And that's what I'm hoping to do now by featuring people like you as well. So both people in Sri Lanka as well as what I would call global visionaries who are really working to bring about a new perspective or shed a new light in areas which perhaps have been historically overlooked. And unfortunately, to talk about Sri Lanka again, a lot of our cultural traditions, global cultural traditions, are being forgotten in favor of some of the new technologies, many of which are wonderful. But I'd love to find a balance between technological innovation and also the celebration of traditional wisdom, because there's such a power in both.
Yeah, I think tech, innovation, and traditional wisdom don't have to be separate. You can easily combine them like YouTube. The technology is the way to bring the stories of ancient wisdom.
Yes.
So they don't have to be separate.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Have you? I have a question. Have you been back to Eritrea or Ethiopia recently?
Oh yeah, many times. Well,
Really?
not. Well, I went to Ethiopia in 2015, and the last time I was in Eritrea was 2005.
Wow. I'm looking forward to go. I built a well through an organization I like called Charity Water, and my friend Galila Bekele is Ethiopian, and I promised her that I would visit. So I've been through a good portion of East Africa. I actually volunteered with. Have you heard of the Greenbelt movement with Wangari Maathai?
I'm not. Tell me about it.
So Wangari Maathai was the first African woman to win the Nobel Peace Prize. She was an incredible, incredible human being. She basically took Kenya had been hugely deforested, and the environment had been degraded to a profound degree. And so she worked to empower. She also noticed that women had been marginalized from the ways in which they had been empowered, perhaps traditionally, in certain regards. Not to say that there was, not to go into the question of equality, but basically what she said was, let's take these two challenges and create a really dynamic solution. So she found a way to compensate and actually fund women for replanting trees throughout the country. And not just planting them, but growing them. And so I traveled with the Greenbelt movement throughout Kenya to see these incredible communities where women had planted trees and rebuilt entire sections of the country. Not just because they planted trees, but then because the economics that came to them as a result of planting trees led to a whole diversity and trickle down, right? Where I visited a family, for example, where they had goats and they had cows and they had bees and they cultivated all these different vegetables with the money, and all their daughters also went to school because of the work that they did with the Greenbelt movement. Whereas I went 10 miles away and I also visited another community that was unfortunately totally deforested, and there was a line of people. It was devastating, literally carving into a 3-foot hole of perched mud, trying to fill up a jerry can of water with dirty, muddy water that was not even an inch deep. So it was such a juxtaposition between the communities where it had been basically desertified by the deforestation, and then other communities where, based on Wangari's visionary leadership, whole communities had worked out to empower themselves and their families of women based on reforesting the country. So it was totally profound. It changed my view of what's possible in so many ways. I think you would love her work. I'll send you something from Wangari.
I have heard in that. I appreciate learning about that. Those are the kind of stories that I like. Somebody sees a challenge and uses that challenge as an opportunity to create a new dynamic solution, and that ends up benefiting a whole community. Same thing with disability. Treat it as an opportunity to build something new, a dynamic new solution, rather than a permanent roadblock.
Yes. Where do you see yourself over the course of the next 5 years? Because you're clearly a leader and an innovator, creating entirely new conversations around this issue. How do you see the next 5 years unfolding? Do you have a vision for that?
My plan for the future is to continue teaching leaders, decision makers, CEOs, executives to treat disability as an opportunity. It's a force that drives innovation. And I want people to hire more people with disabilities. We need people with disabilities in the workforce. We need people with disabilities in classrooms being part of the education system. So by shaping the story of disability and framing it as an opportunity for new solutions, that'll help change the future. So that's one thing I'm working on. I'm also writing a book, which is a lot of fun. I love words. I love writing. So I'm writing a book about my experiences.
Incredible. How far along is the book?
I just finished chapter 6.
All right. That's amazing.
Do you like writing?
I love it. I love it. I'm actually also I got approached by a publisher to work on a book, which I'm intending to write in 2018. And I also love photography and film and anything I can do that I can use to express myself. And like you, I also love to dance.
I remember you said you're very visual.
Yes. There's also actually, when you talk about creating, I created a story in Haiti with a man I'd love to introduce you to sometime, named Wilfred, who actually lost his leg in the earthquake, in the big earthquake in 2010. And it reminded me, based on what you were saying, of people seeing opportunities and innovating. He was a welder, and he lost his leg, and I was with him. I was volunteering in a field hospital. I was with him when he got his prosthesis, his prosthetic leg. And, for many people, they feel very disheartened by confronting the reality of, the fact that they're potentially, be walking on an artificial limb for their life. But Wilfred was so joyful. He was so happy. He started dancing with his artificial limb, and like break dancing, and he literally started kicking a soccer ball. And I kid you not, he wound up starting a soccer team in Haiti of all amputees, men, women, and children. And he turned his welding skills into, to your point about job creation, into working with an amazing organization called Project Metashare, where he makes prosthesis now for youth who have lost a limb. And he even also came to the U.S. to train veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan, U.S. veterans, in how to play soccer using a prosthesis. So I love what you're talking about in terms of seeing both the opportunity and the obstacle, but also like there's tons of jobs that can be created for people who have a very unique skill set and perspective. And I think Wilfred is a wonderful case in point.
That's a beautiful story. So a lot of people have thought about this. If you lose a limb, why not make the next limb better? Why limit it to the average human ability? Why not take the time to create something that's spectacular? So there are people who build prosthetics that perform better than human legs.
Yes. Do you know of any athletes? I know that there have been some athletes even that have competed towards the Olympic level. Are there any examples that you can say off the top of your head of those who have used their disability and actually crafted really dynamic solutions to take them further?
There's a famous Olympian, I don't know his name, who has a prosthetic. There's also a climber. He does mountain climbing and rock climbing and ice climbing. His last name is Her, Hehir, and he's a professor at MIT who builds prosthetics, the bionic leg.
Wow, amazing. I'll look him up and then link to him in the show notes. So I want to be respectful of your time. I just have a few final questions. This has been a great joy for me. I'm so grateful to you for taking the time. Haben. It's been amazing.
It took a lot of work and planning, but we finally have it down.
I know, I know. We've been tenacious. I'm grateful, and I can't wait to. Next time you're in Los Angeles, if you're interested, I'd love to introduce you to the Wolf Connection. I think you would love that place. It's a very special place. Um, but a few final questions. Um, how do you see
Pause here.
what's that?
Can I just pause
Yeah, you
and
can
say
pause.
that Maxine and I have a special relationship, and I don't think she'd like me hanging out with other wolves.
Well, that's a good point. Maybe out of respect for Maxine, we probably won't bring the wolves in then.
She'd appreciate that. Thanks, Michael.
Of course. What brings you deep joy?
I love connecting with people, so I like doing activities that allows me to connect with people. That can be salsa dancing. Salsa is a beautiful way to connect. It can be tandem surfing. When I surf, I have a water guide, and the water guide and I have to communicate really well to be able to surf. Walking around with Maxine, that's a beautiful connection. So I love connecting with people.
Amazing. And what was it like meeting? I have to ask you this. What was it like meeting President Obama?
President Obama is amazing, very warm, respectful. A lot of people are weirded out by differences. And when I explain I'm deafblind and I need them to type on a keyboard so I can read their words on a digital braille display, a lot of people freak out and say, oh, I can't do this. I'm not any good at typing. President Obama was very respectful. He gracefully switched from speaking to typing so that we can connect and communicate. And that's a great role model for the rest of the world.
Wow, I love that. What advice do you have for? You're a role model for many in your own regard, but I would love to know, especially as it relates to, say, little girls, because I know you're a model for many people. But I was thinking, what counsel you are still a young woman, very accomplished, but a young woman in your own right. But what to say a young girl who is facing challenges or feels overwhelmed at times? What advice would you have for young girls today in terms of facing the challenges before them and also the opportunities?
I strongly encourage everyone to treat obstacles as an opportunity to create a new solution. Sometimes it's going to take you a while to figure out what the solution it will be. Maybe you need to take time to grieve, to feel anger, to allow yourself to feel that frustration. But afterwards, shift gears and move on to problem solving. Find a solution. You can do it. Just be thoughtful and creative.
I love it. You're a very positive person, but are there, like anyone, I imagine, there's got to be moments where you get down. And I actually like the fact that you said feel the emotion, because I think so many people spiritually bypass and don't actually process it so that they can effectively move through it. But also then use that as fuel for the opportunity. How do you deal with times of challenge within yourself?
I like being honest. So if I feel sad, I take time to feel sad. If I feel tired, I don't lie or hide the the fact that I'm tired. I try to make sure I get time to get rest. So it's important to be honest about the emotions. And then once you've given your time to feel that emotion, then you can shift gears and start problem solving, start seeking solutions.
What is, you can choose one or both. What's the most fascinating book and or person you've discovered lately?
Interesting. Well, this isn't a recent discovery. I've known this for a few years, but I really, really like Cheryl Strayed's writing. Beautiful writing style. And one of my favorite books is Tiny Beautiful Things. It's a collection of letters, honest stories that talk about many of the challenges in life, from grief, losing someone, to building relationships and struggling with relationships. And she has a fun, playful, and very thoughtful way of talking about all those issues.
Wow, beautiful. I'll have to check it out. Thank you for the recommendation.
Let me know what you think of it once you've read it.
Okay, that sounds perfect. Okay, one of the things I like to ask, so I've been in the process of interviewing people that I want to learn from. And one of the questions I ask is, and people define their peak differently. To me, a peak is like a mountain, and I look at it like a journey. And it's not about standing on the top, the sort of peak, but more about the journey to get there. But I think people are really interested in knowing kind of where people come from, as well as their tools. So if you had one or two tools or mindsets, if you will, that help you live at your peak, or that you keep in mind in climbing the mountains all of us inevitably go throughout our life, what would those one or two mindsets or tools be that help you live at your peak?
I prefer dancing metaphors.
Okay, let's switch to dancing metaphor. What keeps you in the dance?
So I prefer dancing metaphors because it's about being connected. Salsa dancing, swing, other partner dances, it's about being connected. And in order to communicate in that connection, you also have to be aware of yourself and be honest about your needs. And be open to listening and feeling with your whole presence and your whole body the communication the other person is sending, the beat, musicality, rhythm. So that's the metaphor that I use for life. I'm always listening. What am I feeling? What is the world communicating? And when I'm connected, that's when I feel the most joy. So it's not like me against the world. It's trying to be me with the world.
Wow. That's one of the more beautiful things I've heard lately.
Thank you, Michael.
So, Haben, I want to take just a moment before we wrap up to honor you. And I know that you don't like to be called an inspiration, so I will refrain from doing so. However, I want to acknowledge you and honor you for the dance that you are in the world, for the fact that you lead with listening, which is unfortunately not the leadership trait that's most often exemplified, but I feel is exemplified in you, in your way of being, in my experience of you from the moment I met you through this conversation. You are always looking for a possibility to connect more deeply with another person, meeting them where they're at. And I honor you for your deep wisdom and sensitivity to that possibility, which is connection. And I thank you so much for taking the time to dance with me today.
You're very welcome. It was a fun dance. You're a great dancer.
Thank you. And when you come to Los Angeles, if you want to go for a surf, you'll be better than me, but I'd love to go for a surf sometime. Maxine won't get jealous about the surf, I don't think.
It'll be fun. Surfing is another way to connect with people and also with the ocean. You're also talented in terms of highlighting stories, bringing out the great stories in people, and that's really important work. So thank you for amplifying stories around the world.
It's a pleasure. I look forward to our next conversation, Haben, and I'm very grateful for your time and just who you are in the world. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Aiko.
Okay, I'll talk to you soon. Thanks again.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.